All right, welcome back everyone to the Qualified Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zielinski, and today with me I have Austen Meier with his business, Squeaky Clean Books, and he is based out of Tampa, Florida. Austin, how are you today?
Yeah, can't complain. Yeah.
Excellent. So give us a background on yourself. Born and raised in Tampa, or did you move over?
No, we started actually in Montana, is where my wife and I both grew up, and that's where we kind of started our entrepreneurial journey. But we, as I'm sure we'll go through, wanted to change things up, and we definitely got that change coming to Florida.
So what what was kind of some of the reasons why you wanted to make that change?
Yeah, Montana, pretty small place. I think there's maybe 1 million people in the whole state, and pretty spread out. I think it takes probably about 12 hours to drive across the state. So very rural area. My wife and I, the valley that we lived in had under 50,000 people. The town that we lived in had under 5,000 people.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it was pretty small. Yeah. And not a cultural hotspot, um, terrible winters. And, it was a great place. It's a beautiful place. It's definitely a place to visit. But as far as living in Montana versus visiting it as a tourist, very different. So
Is
we
there a big
were,
tourist market there?
there is, yeah, just about, I'd say 2 hours north of where we lived is Glacier National Park. So
Okay.
like that's a main tourist attraction. Where we were was kind of close to the Idaho border. To our west and north of us was Canada, BC. So yeah, it's a very beautiful place. It's definitely, everybody talks about Yellowstone. That was filmed probably 15 minutes from where we lived
Oh
in
my gosh.
Montana. So yeah, it was definitely a place that people liked to visit. But being a local there and growing up there, just small town living.
Small town and you were ready for the change.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so when you were younger, did you have any idea what you wanted to be? Did business owner or ranch owner, farm, you know,
Yeah, I did. Actually, so my family, we built a house. We decided that we were going to build a house ourselves, and through that 9 month process, doing it all by ourselves, that got to see a lot of different parts of the construction, all of that, and I really enjoyed the electrical part. So when we was going through that process, I was kind of coming into high school at the time, and I was like, I think maybe an electrician. That's something that I like, the technical component of it, kind of the science and the math behind it. But it was something that I felt was like, well, it's a high paying job, and it's something that I could work for myself and all of that. Kind of a high paying trades position. So that's where it started. Um, but that changed. That changed and evolved over time for sure.
all right. And anybody, business owners in the family for, you know, passing down any knowledge to you that you would say kind of made you who you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Although I can't say that it was a great start as far as like being a business owner and doing things the right way, I'll say. But the context of, working for yourself, having your own business and all of that is something that was definitely around me. My grandmother, she had a cleaning business. I actually found out later, when I named my cleaning business, that it was the same name as her cleaning business when she had it.
So you had no idea that she
No
was
idea at the
even
time.
had one and you just somehow picked out the same name.
Yeah, she was retired at that point, so it was like she didn't have her business anymore. but the cleaning crew, that was the popular name. So apparently there was some something in the blood that said this needs to be the name. Um, so cleaning business for that. My grandfather, he was a contractor, um, did all kinds of remodel and stuff like that. Um, my parents, they had a couple of businesses when I was, kind of, I guess, teenager, coming into my teenage years. The first one was a custom closet business. So we built like custom storage systems. So kind of in the construction area as well. And we had that for a while and ended up selling that. Um, and then I helped my parents. We actually started a window cleaning company, which they still have and still run back in Montana. So I kind of grew up with those things around me. My wife, on the other hand, her parents still own and operate a restaurant. She grew up in a restaurant. So there was lots of entrepreneurs around me, maybe not doing things the right way, but the seed was there, and I guess the concept was there.
So they could relate to, I mean, any business will have struggles at some point. So they can relate to the highs, the lows, the long hours, the basically everything, and they give pointers and help you out, I'm sure. And your wife, same thing with the family. Restaurant business is tough. Margins are super small. If you get one server sick and another calls off and you're short, then it's tough. It's restaurant
Yeah,
business is a tough business to be in, but every business has its pros and cons. So
yeah,
I'm
for
sure
sure.
you guys have stories that you have told back and forth about growing up with these family businesses and kind of learning from it from a young age. Did you go to college in Montana? Did you go to college at all?
I actually did. I
Okay.
kind of did I guess this kind of goes back to when I wanted to be an electrician. When we were building the house, it was about that time. I actually transitioned into homeschooling for for my high school years, which at that point was back in '06, '07, um, when I started. And, it really, that was before it was kind of common. I think that's a lot more common now. Mine was like through the mail, sending exams through the mail, nothing was online. It was all books and mail, which was kind of funny. But um, so I started doing that. We were building the house, and I kind of chose a lot of my electives around that. Be like, ooh, I want to be an electrician, So a lot of math, a lot of electrical, kind of courses. But once I started kind of getting through school, of course, we built the house right during kind of the crash or right before the crash, and building prices went up. I remember like we were buying materials for the house, wire being included, and the cost of wire like quadrupled in the matter of
And are
a
you
couple of
talking
weeks.
crash of like '08
Yeah, so
or
just
not the
predating that,
recent
like
crash?
leading right up. Yeah, '08 crash, the
Okay.
housing crash in '08. So with all of that going on, that's when I was kind of like, I don't know if electrical is what I should do. Like getting into construction, because it seemed like construction wasn't in a very good place at the time. So I switched a lot of my electives and still kept the math. I actually did accounting and business and kind of leaned more that way, a little bit more general. So that was more kind of like my education based in a formal sense. But after that, it was more just kind of like throw things at the wall, see what sticks, jump in and figure it out later. The just jump into
Get
business and
get
figure it out as you go.
get, get your feet wet and figure it out as you go.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
So
you, at what point then did you start the cleaning service?
So I had kind of been in a lot of different service businesses, like growing up, not just in the family businesses. I worked for some other companies that did like restaurant hood cleaning, um, cleaned restaurant kitchens, did window cleaning before my parents had started their business, carpet cleaning, a mobile pressure washing company, did a little irrigation. So it was like, got a little bit of a taste of a lot of different fields of field service businesses. And, so that was kind of like the taste of like, they were all had like a little bit to do with cleaning. It seemed like everything, water and cleaning seemed to be the consistency. So when I first met my wife, we were, kind of both working several jobs. We had little things. Montana, there's a lot of seasonal work, so you do some things in the summer, some things in the winter. Water freezes in the winter's time, so you can't do a lot of window cleaning or things like that. So that was kind of the reason that we got into that. Be like, one, I want to be in the service industry. I've done a lot in the cleaning part of it. I want something that was stable, like consistent. Like I can have recurring clients and have kind of, I know what to expect with revenue.
Sure.
And, something that I felt like I was good at. And so being detail oriented and a little perfectionist, was definitely in there. So that's what leaned me in that direction. So I had done that for a while. But when my wife and we got married, actually, that's when started talking about like, hey, how could we turn this into a business? How could we work together? She didn't necessarily want to work together when we first got married, but I talked her into it.
It's tough. It's tough getting a spouse involved with a business just because I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. It could be, because you're married, so you spend time together at home, but now put a business into it 24/7. So
Yeah, for
you
sure.
kind of have to have a family perspective, but you also have to have the business perspective. And if somebody's wrong and somebody's right, it's hard conversations to have for sure.
Yeah. Well, don't ask who was right or wrong.
Well,
But
you'll never be right.
well, okay.
Well, even
Yeah,
if
it
you're
was.
right, you could be wrong, but
That's true. That's absolutely true. Um, no, so I think one of the things that really won my wife over when we were talking about it is, because I was working a couple of jobs. I was doing irrigation, I was doing window cleaning, I was doing pressure washing, just kind of a medley of things. My wife, she was working in her parents' restaurant, and she also was a substitute teacher. So she would do that during the day, restaurant at night. And we just never saw each other. It was just like we were constantly going. So once we realized, be like, hey, we could make more in an hour than you make all day as a teacher, then that was kind of the shift. We can do it together. We can make a lot more money in a very much shorter period of time. So that's what sold us. So that's kind of when we started going down that road, making it an official business and doing it together.
and what year was that?
Let's see, that would have been 2013 was the
2013.
year that we got married. So yeah, shortly after that.
So your inspiration to start the business was financial for your wife's side a little bit and just freedom
Yeah,
to do what you want on your terms. Basically why everybody really wants to start a business. It's kind of three main factors: the financial, the freedom, and to help people.
yeah, no, for sure. That was definitely it. Control over schedule. Feel like could be my own boss, and my wife and we could work together. Before we got married, how we actually kind of like got to know each other is one of my winter jobs to get through was washing dishes in her parents' restaurant. And so that's kind of how we first met. Well, we knew each other for a long time, but that's when we started working together, spending time together, and getting to know each other. So I wanted more of that. I was like, yeah, let's work together. Let's do this together. So yeah, but financial reasons, spending time together, having control over schedule is definitely the main ones.
So talk about the business then. Over the years with your wife, how how is it to run a service-based business in a small town of 5,000 people?
Yeah, good question. My wife and I, we were talking about this kind of like before before the call today. And there were some pluses and there were some minuses. To a certain extent, it was very challenging for the commercial part of it because we had commercial jobs, but it was very difficult to get into those. Usually, companies were kind of like locked in. A lot of our accounts, they'd had the same cleaning company for decades, and it wasn't until somebody retired or didn't want to do it anymore that it was even up for grabs. So, some of those, like in the case of like one of the big banks in our area, that was the case. Health problems and all of that. The gentleman that um, did the cleaning had that contract before. His health just wasn't there, and we had been going in every year, kind of before contracts renew, for about 3 years to this bank prior to that. So when that day finally came, we were a shoe in, but nothing you could really plan for. You got to play
Right.
the long game. Um,
So did you do any residential in the meantime?
yeah, so we did. We started out primarily in residential, but we, saw the one, it was a little easier on us to do the commercial and, a little bit more consistent, a little more consistency with commercial. So we were always kind of looking to try to grow the commercial side and scale back on the residential, which was difficult. But on the other hand, it residential was a lot easier actually in a small town. There was other people obviously that did cleaning, but being in a small town, a lot of it was unofficial. It's like kind of the mom, has a cleaning job. She cleans the neighbor's house, once a week, on the side. But as far as like being an established business in that area, we did stand out. It was kind of a short list. Um,
And
and
everybody
one of
knows, I mean, I would assume everybody knows almost everybody in a small town like that. So
Yeah, for
it
sure.
they, they drop their one cleaner that they've had and they go to you. Kind of word spreads a little quickly and they know that
Yeah.
you're now their cleaner and what happened to the old one and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that really was it. The fact that we had a really good service was made up for a lot of failings in a lot of other areas. Not being not being organized, not being, business savvy and all of those things. But the fact that we were there, we're turning out a very good product and we're transforming for our clients. And so that was very, very key, I think, to getting kind of integrated into the community because we never ran advertisements like in that small town. It was like word of mouth. We got calls, almost every day from people, asking about cleaning. So we got to be very choosy, which was great. Um, and if I would have known better, I would have capitalized on that instead of being like, oh no, this isn't a good fit. There was a lot of work that left that, if we had done things differently, we could have capitalized on. But so that was a plus for sure. The small town component and being connected. And I think just like in any service industry, like it is a relationship business. We're there to provide a service, but it's more how the customer feels about the experience. And it's a very personal in the service industry. So being able to build those connections, not just with, potential clients, but other businesses in the area, I think was really huge. Um, we could kind of build a network, if they said, hey, do you guys do carpets? Well, that's not what we focus on, but we know a great company that we would love to refer you to that will take care of you for carpet cleaning. Or do you guys do snow removal? No, but we know of somebody you can call. So we were able to do a lot of referral and build good relationships with other businesses, even other cleaning businesses, people that we knew in the industry that made that a really strong network. And we were able to use that to provide a lot of value for anybody that we came in contact with, even if they didn't become a customer.
Do you think it would be possible for someone to have success in a small town but live remotely and never to have lived in that town? Let's say I wanted to start a cleaning service in the town that you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think I would have as much success as you?
Um, that's a really good question. Um, the area has changed quite a bit. I think COVID really changed a lot of things. There was a huge influx of people that moved into Montana. I'm sure it's twice as big now as when we were there. And from that standpoint, there's a little bit client base, and other people are from other areas moving in. It's not just the locals, the way that it was when we were there. So I would say it would be a very refreshing thing to have a company that was really dialed in. I think the quality of service, price point is probably a concern in places like that. It was an ongoing joke there that, Montana, the Bitterroot Valley that we grew up in, was poverty with a view. So pricing, there was definitely some things there that would be a factor.
So,
But as far as like being able to service and take on and have the infrastructure to take on a lot of people actually that were calling us, I think that would have led to a lot more success than we were able to get.
so now talk about what you mean by a business that would be dialed in,
Mm-hmm.
because I know the background story. We had a previous conversation, and you told me you and your wife ran the business for 7 years, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just you two, no software, no tech stuff. So just
Yeah, for sure.
let's
Yeah.
let's go into that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, this is all like, don't do this. um, yeah, we were doing like cash and check. We didn't have a way of collecting credit card payments. We were doing handwritten invoices. We were, manually calling our clients, being confirming appointments, going to and from jobs. So many things that were not efficient, wasn't efficient, and took a lot of time, took a lot of direct attention from us that honestly could have been automated. It still would have been a great experience for them. Um, using something that sent out reminders or being able to make them pay and us get paid a lot easier would have been huge. Um, just having kind of a consistent, repeatable thing, for us because we were doing it, or if we used contractors, we worked together. So there was easy to like manage the quality control on jobs. But if you were to hire employees and send them to a job and have a consistent service that you're offering your clients over and over again, I think that's a big part of, being dialed in to where you could offer that kind of service consistently for your clients. I think that would have been really important. If I knew then what I knew now, I would have capitalized on that. Um,
You have a laundry list of
oh,
what
so many
not to
things.
do, what not to do. And if you were to start another cleaning service today, you would know everything. You would basically do the opposite of what you did then.
I would try
And
to
you'd
just
probably
take the
take off
opposite of
in,
whatever I did.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even honestly, in this business, I have to say, has been kind of that second start. Like the cleaning business that we had before, very much a, figure it out, figure it out as you go and learn everything the hard way and figure out what doesn't work. And it really has helped solidify in our new business how we can do that, how we can bring in that structure and have things dialed in and be able to do it in a scalable, a sustainable way. Um, so that
So you didn't have any of that structure with the cleaning service. It was just
people mailing
by
us
the
checks or leaving
seat of
cash on
your
the
pants.
table. Yeah, I have no idea. Now I think about like as a bookkeeper, if I had my business as a client, I'd be like, what is this cash deposit for? I don't know. I don't know if that invoice was paid or not. I'm just going by if it's in my head what that they paid. There was no systems, no financial records. It was keeping receipts in a shoebox until the end of the year, pulling them all out, adding up the invoices,
Oh
adding up the
dear.
receipts in order to get the taxes done. No, nothing. As a bookkeeper, I'm ashamed, now looking back at how things were. Uh,
But I
but
guess that's the path that took you to where you're at now and why you sold the cleaning service and now you have the bookkeeping service for service-based businesses, home cleaning and any cleaning service like that. So I guess it was your path to what you need now and what you do now. You struggled back then. I mean, when we talked before, you were telling me that you and your wife would have contracts that were so close that you guys walked to them
yeah,
and you didn't even drive.
yeah, to it did improve. Like we were able to actually make some pretty drastic changes to the business towards the end, kind of in the last couple of years that we had the business, um, which I'm very grateful for because it actually meant making money and being profitable and being organized and actually having kind of a business that we originally set out to have control over our schedule and you know be supported by our business rather than supporting our business. And so we did get to realize that, which was great. But that's not how it started. But there was a big shift, which I'm sure we'll we'll talk about like what that shift was. Um,
I mean, we
yeah.
could get into it now with you mean both sides of the family having business owners. Did you guys ever talk to them and did they ever like know how kind of I guess chaotic it started out as and did they ever provide any insight?
Um, I don't know how to say this without it sounding arrogant because it was not because of our awesomeness. I guess it was just out of being willing to solve problems that I think we saw growing up in the different family businesses that we were around that just didn't get solved. So in a lot of ways, we had surpassed our parents or the other businesses that we had grown up in, and so we felt very successful from that standpoint. Now, looking at business and what business can be, be like, oh, there was so much room, like we could have done so much more, so much differently. uh, but we did we did talk to them, on occasion. But honestly, it was kind of a just like we were learning from our mistakes as we made them, we were also looking at their mistakes and trying to learn from those as well.
And did they ever kind of tell you things that you may not wanted to hear because you were already at that level where you guys saw your business has surpassed them? Did was there ever a time where they might have overstepped in your eyes and tried to give unsolicited information or help?
Actually kind of in later periods it has went the other direction where I get a lot of calls from family members and they're like, well, what should we do about this? um which is, I guess I'm honored that they feel like they that they could learn something like that from me. But it's a different relationship to have as a child to be in
Yes.
that. So it's kind of interesting. But um, yeah, I wouldn't say there's any animosity, there. It is, amiable, but
Well, looking back on it
yeah.
now, seeing that, I mean, how you described to me the cleaning service was, and now you're saying that family members were asking for help and guidance for their businesses. How does it make you feel now knowing how you were running that business and people were asking for help versus you would do everything completely differently if you had that cleaning service? So does it make you happy or slightly worried about the advice that you were giving back then? I mean,
Oh, I think any entrepreneur deals with imposter syndrome, right? Like that's where entrepreneurs are blazing trails and doing things and making decisions that most people are like, ah, that seems like a lot of work, or that seems scary. So there is, some pride, I guess, that comes from that feeling, like kind of jumped in and did it in spite of the fears. But um yeah, it's something that I'm very grateful for. The saying, it's like the road to success is paved with failure. And I feel like we laid a really heavy foundation at the beginning that is, paying dividends. And that's why I say, like, no, it didn't go the college education route. And, honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. There's times that I still wish, like, oh, there would be a lot of value in, having that kind of education. But I think that there's a very different education that comes from doing it that's not textbook, theorized or, intellectualized, but instead, like, this is actionable, this is jumping in, this is, playing with live ammo and figuring it out as you go. That, I wouldn't trade that. I wouldn't trade that education.
that's awesome. I've always wondered how homeschooling, I mean, I've seen it in movies and shows and stuff, but
It was
to
the top of my
talk to
class.
somebody who's, yeah, it's who are you? Are you talking to the dog, their cat, or like your parents? I mean, it's not. It's super different, and it's exciting to see somebody who has come from that because it's not something that I'm used to, and I never met anybody personally who was homeschooled. So just growing up in that environment and then becoming a, I'm not saying nobody can be homeschooled and become business owners, but it's just seeing different paths from people and where they grow up and how they kind of formulate their own path in life with the outside environment is always cool for me to see. And that's why it's always a question that I ask, or those couple questions like background, school, like what was childhood like? And some people you could see based on their answer, like what they did is just straight path to what got them to where they're at today. And some are different, their
Yeah.
path they got bounced off of and that led them to where they're at the moment. So
Yeah.
definitely. Would you
Yeah.
recommend homeschooling? Do you want to homeschool kids?
You know, that is a really good question. It's bittersweet, just like being in a small town. Um, you know, on the one hand, it was something that I probably could have got a better education outside of it, outside of homeschooling. The one thing that I think it gave me, which I think is the goal of education, is it's not necessarily to learn specific things, but it's to learn how to learn. And I definitely had to do that in homeschooling. Um, I was my own teacher, which is scary, but I was able to go through. I started high school and I graduated maybe a year and a half later, so I was able to go at my own
Wow.
pace. I was graduated before I turned 16 and jumped into the workforce. Like that was kind of like my quick start was jumping in and just starting. Um, my wife and I, we like started a business in 2013, but I started kind of like doing things on the side. I had, little jobs that I did here and there, clean a house here, had a restaurant kitchen that I cleaned for years. Um, all of those things, but, did, before I was 18, working for other companies in the service industry. So it was very just trial by fire, just like jump in and figure it out as you go. Um, which I wouldn't give that up. It was a hard start, but it was a valuable start.
So how did people feel seeing like a 16-year-old kid coming into their house to clean and just some of these
I have no
jobs
idea.
like
I know. I look at pictures of my wedding and be like, how did they let us get married? Like, it looks so young. But it was one of those things that growing up, like even in the family businesses, I started working, in those when I was 12. So I was always kind of like on job sites or, in that working. So I think it was normal, I guess, for me, like from my perspective. I have no idea how how it looked like from the outside perspective. Um, but always seemed to have like the ability to just like communicate with people and talk. And I think being in those environments made it a lot easier. So I guess I'm not the traditional bookkeeper in that case, because most most of them are introverts and not social things is not their strong suit. Um, I do enjoy that. I'm still an introvert. I still like I need a nap after this. Like I'm gonna go for a nap. But it's something that I do get a lot of value and validation from connecting with people and interacting that way.
I worked for a moving company when I was 16 and it was a family friends moving company, so I guess they paid me cash, but there was a little bit of liability because the insurance, if I got hurt, you got to be 18 and I was 16. So whenever they gave me jobs, they're like, just remember, you're not 16, you're 18. And I remember several homeowners at different points were like, what is this scrawny 140-pound 16-year-old doing moving with these big firefighters? And they're like, is he even going to be able to pick anything up? I was out working everybody because I had that chip on my shoulder. And at the end of the day, they would be like, wow, I did not expect that. I mean, 18-year-old, not 16, but
All right.
me knowing them and telling them that, I'll do it. I'm not, we call, whenever I move my friends, there's the cushion guy, the guy who only carries the couch cushions, the pillows, the blankets, doesn't really want to move any of the heavy boxes or the furniture. I was
Yeah.
never the cushions guy. I was all right, let's go pick up the 350-pound safe with another guy and all this old wooden furniture that's several hundred pounds. So definitely, I feel like those kind of experiences in those early years for anybody is monumental for, I'm not saying physical labor in that sense, but just doing something that people may not think you're up to
Hmm.
is huge. Not like a retail job where you work at the mall folding clothes, because I did that too, and that's anybody can kind of do that. But there's just other jobs where I feel like in your mid-teens is, if you can get it, it's a huge learning experience. And I think working in a restaurant is one thing that I want my kids to do, at least for a summer or if a year, to just see how working in a restaurant and serving other people, because you have great people and then some people come in and have a bad day, and you're going to get the short end of the stick on that one if they're not happy. So you'll
For
learn a
sure.
lot from people working in a restaurant and just doing those kinds of things.
It takes a special person to do that. I
Yes.
served one
So
night. Served one night and I'm like, oh, I'm done. I can't do this.
I worked
I
in a
can't make my
restaurant
mind
10
go in
years.
5 different directions like that.
It's in the beginning, it's crazy. It's super hard. So I mean, at least you learn after the one day you're like, nope, not it for me.
I'm a single tasker. I'm not like I have 3 orders in my head and trying to balance and juggle does not work with my mind. But
Focus on
yeah,
the one and kill that one and take it to the next level.
yeah, for sure. You gotta work with the ADD. You can't you can't go working against it like that.
Some people can manage it, most can't in that sense, but what I guess going back to the cleaning service,
Mhm.
I guess that helped you then, the ADD and the focusing on the tasks. But with with working with your wife, how did you guys kind of split the duties?
Yeah. So when it came to kind of the finance side, I always kind of did more of that as far as like making the deposits, sending out invoices, things like that, especially on the commercial side. My wife wasn't as comfortable with especially cold calls like, hey, let's just go into this random business and ask if they need cleaning services. So we had unique, it wasn't necessarily structured into like certain categories. Like she handled marketing, I had handled operations. We had kind of like parts of those things that we did, which was a little unique. I don't think that's how most businesses are structured. But if it was like cold call or initial contact with people, that was my part of it. If it was like the dealing with the customer, like supporting the customer and communicating with established customers, that was my wife. And so we had, kind of that little unique divide um, in the business, like keeping track of, supplies and things like that was a little bit more in my wheelhouse, kind of overviewing the jobs. But
And
she
how
she was
many
incredible with scheduling, like that was her. She was like, oh yeah, you got that. The scheduling and keeping things organized and knowing where we're supposed to be and when was definitely her strong suit.
and how many employees do you guys have?
In the cleaning business,
Yes.
so we didn't ever have employees, which was one of those things like, man, we let a lot of opportunity go by not structuring that way and kind of taking that leap. But we did have some friends that ended up, we helped them start their own cleaning business and we subcontracted together. So if we had really big contracts, like Montana, we have ammunition factories and different facilities like that, gun manufacturers. So if we had jobs like that, that would take us days to do, we could bring them on and they would help us with those things. We also, one of the great things that happened by building that relationship with them, working with them, and realizing that they also were providing a very good service, and we were able to kind of help them dial that in. Is we felt very comfortable with each other, like helping each other out. They're like, hey, we'd actually like to go on a vacation and not be like sitting there watching the business and can't look away for a minute, otherwise going to be trying to put a fork in the outlet. It was one of those things like they could go on a trip and be like, yeah, your commercial accounts, we'll go in, we'll take care of those for you, and vice versa. So, my wife and I, like, we had the opportunity finally, went to Ireland, like, got to travel to Ireland and spend a few weeks in Ireland because we at least had enough infrastructure that those things could be covered while we were gone. And it was a good testament to them as cleaners and our relationship with them working together is a lot of our commercial accounts be like, oh yeah, we were in Ireland for 3 weeks. Be like, oh, we didn't know you were gone. Like, that's great. Like, that means that nothing caught on fire while we were gone. So we didn't have like the employee route, but that was something that we kind of built in a little bit with that.
Would you have been as successful if that never have happened? If your friends didn't ask for the help to start their own?
I don't think we would have lasted as long. I think that's where it would have come down to. I think the work would have got done. Obviously, having help, allowed us to expand what work we could take on in a limited case. Um, but it was very helpful because we had kind of like a packed schedule. They were starting their company, and there was a lot of things like, hey, this isn't going to work. We're not going to have time for this. Just not the type of job that we want. And they loved those ones. They loved, the one time, like move in, move outs. They had contracts with builders, so they would do like construction cleanups. And they loved that. We wanted nothing to do with those. Like, we wanted the consistency, recurring, you know, uh, banks, offices, residential houses on a regular routine. And that wasn't what they wanted to do as much. So it was a good, symbiotic relationship with them, being able to kind of defer work to each other. And at least, people were still getting taken care of, even if we didn't have the opportunity to do it.
For sure. And 7 years you guys had the clinic, 2013 to end of 2019.
Yeah, so we started in 2013, right after my wife and I got married, and then we sold. I mean, I say sold. It was kind of a unique situation with selling, but we sold that right before we moved to Florida, which happened. We would have sold. Yeah, it was like December 2019, January 2020 when we sold the business.
And what was the reasoning for selling?
So the main thing is, we wanted a new challenge. We wanted to, broaden our horizons a little bit, get out of a small town. We wanted to go somewhere with some culture, with some population, um, reestablish ourselves. Growing up in a small town, especially where your family is. My wife Gina, like her family as well. That opportunity to, like, we're going to create our own identity instead of being like, oh, you're so and so's son. Oh yeah, you're you're so and so's daughter. Oh yeah, we know your parents or your grandparents. We wanted to kind of like find our own identity. So, we thought about like, well, we could move to another area and we could start another cleaning business. You know, but with the cleaning business as it was very much dependent on the clients and the contracts that we had there. So it was very location dependent, and I wouldn't have had any. There wasn't any structure like employees to be able to, oh, we're going to keep this business going and we're just going to relocate. We were the business. Um, the way we structured it was a sole proprietor. Didn't have like an LLC or a corporation established. Didn't have employee structure, any of those things. So that was more the like, well, how can we move somewhere else and kind of get a fresh start? And that meant, doing something with the business.
What did you end up doing with the old business?
So because of the time frame, we it was a very quick thing. We had talked about wanting to move, and we decided to be like, hey, there was an opportunity. We could move to Florida, actually the East Coast. My in-laws, they have a condo over there that they winter at. And we were like, hey, let's sell. We're like, let's move. Let's go there for 9 months. We'll be in a more tropical climate. We'll be in a more populated area. It's just 100% different. It's on the East Coast instead of being over, closer to the West Coast. It's just the total opposite of where we're at right now. So let's go over there, 9 months. We'll, be there, and then we can see what's next. So we came over to Florida. We did a little scoping, scoped it out, did a little trip, talked to our in-laws, asked them if, we could, lease their condo for 9 months in the off season. And it all just kind of came together really quickly. So we're like, okay, so we got home. We're like, now what? Now we got to sell stuff. We got to figure out what to do with the business. So what we ended up doing with the business was, because a sole proprietor operating, under a DBA, but, it didn't have its own entity, its own EIN number or anything like that. Hard to sell the business itself. So the friends that we had started working with and we had worked closely with the last few years before we moved, they were like, hey, some of the contracts that you have, like, we already know them. We've helped, do them, handle some of the nights or handle them when you're gone. We'd really like the opportunity for those contracts. So the ones that they wanted, we ended up just like selling those contracts and, talking with the business as far as like, hey, going to be the same service, everything. They already have access. They already, know the drill. It's not going to change anything on your hand. We'd like to just pass this over to them. So we kind of arranged those things, but it was a 6-week period by the time we got back from Florida and said we're going to be in Florida. Was 6-week period. So
Very fast.
very fast. So in that window, that's just what made sense. So we sold those few contracts, and that gave us a little, capital to start the next journey. But it was very much, I don't know what it's going to be, but we're just going to go and take this time and figure it out. So prior to that, and I don't know if we even talked about this earlier, one of the things that I was doing kind of on the side is I ended up writing kind of like an ebook about finance for small businesses. And so I wrote that kind of gave me the bug. We had started figuring out some things and really drilling down on the numbers in the cleaning business before we sold it. And things were, really starting to go well with that. And so I was like, okay, how can we repeat this? Or how could we, take these lessons that we've figured out, the things that are working, how can we help other businesses? So that was kind of my little side project. And so I was like, okay, we have this book. Maybe we'll do some courses, some online, like do course creation, some programs, do something online, but something that could help other business owners. So we had that kind of just floating as an idea in the back of our head, but it was just kind of like, let's just go and we'll have time to figure it out when we don't have the business and we're in a different spot. So we did that. We went to Florida. We came back 6 weeks until we were in Florida, but it was about 3 weeks into that COVID hit, or like COVID came on the radar, in March of 2020. So we didn't have a place anymore. Like the house that we were renting, like we gave up our lease. We sold everything that we had fit in the smallest U-Haul trailer they made. And we pulled that behind our vehicle and we slept in it across country because it was lockdown at that point. We were just like, well, we don't have a place to live here. We don't have a job here. So I guess we're going anyway. So it was very kind of just weird timing with all of that.
Well, you lucked out having your in-laws having a spare place in Florida that you go to,
Yeah.
because if you didn't and COVID happened, then it would have been so difficult for you guys to find anything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, our original goal was we were going to spend 9 months in Florida, which we were grateful to like be able to go there. And then our goal was when our in-laws came back for the winter to winter in Florida, we had every intention of moving to India Like that was our plan, which changed obviously because COVID wasn't just a weekend thing, it was
No.
something that went
As
on
much as
quite a
everybody
while.
would like it to have been a
Yeah.
week-long thing or a couple weeks, but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
it wasn't. So everything kind of changed. Anything that we, planned for or thought would happen completely did a 180, during that period. But we were kind of like untethered, and we had time on our side. The fact that it's like, well, we're not trying to do this on the side. We're not trying to do this while work a day job or just do this as a side hustle. We're just like 100% diving in, and we'll just build this plane in the air, so to speak.
So, do you know, two questions. How did you approach financial planning and management when you had the cleaning service
Okay,
in the
good question.
beginning versus the end? Because towards the
Okay.
end, you're writing ebooks on finance and bookkeeping, and towards the end. But how did it start?
Oh, it started bad. Um, so, I think I mentioned it before. It was like in our business, cash and checks, so we were like at the mercy of the mail service, or, some jobs they left a check, but for the most part, it's like waiting for payment and reaching out, trying to get paid from clients. Handwritten invoices, like didn't have a system for generating, invoices, letters, stamps, all of those things, sending those things out. We didn't have any accounting software, so it was just a bank account.
Spreadsheets or not even spreadsheets?
Later on, but no, not even that at the beginning. Like there was nothing. When it came tax time, the laughable thing is the first year of business, we did our own taxes, which I wouldn't recommend anybody to do. But it was just like sitting down in a room full of white paper. Like every inch of the living room was just covered in receipts
Oh
and
dear.
invoices, adding everything up for each month and like putting it in a Google Doc. Be like, this is how much we made and this is how much we spent. But none of that happened until the end of the year. We weren't doing that through the year. It was just a huge pile at the end of the year, trying to get things together so we could pay taxes. So, which we were very unprepared for. Got the tax bill. It's like, oh, now what? So there was like no financial planning. Our business and our personal were so commingled. One of the big reasons for that is we didn't know how much to pay ourselves. Like we didn't know how much the business needed, how much we needed. So it was just like all the money's in one account and everything gets paid out of one account. So we're always trying to like tether, was this a personal purchase, this business? No organization that way.
Would you recommend that to anybody right now?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, I actually like came up with a solution for that, but no, I would not say the shoebox at the end of the year. Um, but we didn't really know how much to charge. We didn't know how much we could pay ourselves. Um, we didn't know any of our expenses, like our costs as they were happening. We like, well, I know we're spending a lot on fuel, going back and forth to our jobs, or I know that we're, you know, buying these supplies. But as far as like knowing what the actual expenses were, business or personal, it was just kind of like, well, this is a need, so I guess we're paying for it, and there's money in the bank account, so I guess that's good. Like, but nothing was separated. Like it was just one big pot, and everything was getting paid out of it, which is a IRS nightmare. I'm sure, like, if we ever
I
got
can't
audited during
imagine.
that time, it would have been a nightmare. The IRS would have hated us, and we would have hated life.
I'm sweating a little bit just thinking about how you went through that for a couple of years. It's just tough.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, and the other thing is we didn't really have a service territory. So it was huge. We had we tried to like figure like our furthest job north and south, we were covering over 60 miles. Probably like 65 miles was the length of our service area. So, we were always on the road. We were putting, over 30,000 miles on our car every year. We were spending just as much in fuel as we were in rent. We found out later when we calculated it. It was just an insane amount of time, not just wasting in fuel, but time just sitting in the car between jobs, which made it very inefficient. So that's where things were, like when we started. That's how dysfunctional everything was and haphazard. But we started to kind of like, we hit this point to where our schedule cannot take on one more client. Like, I don't care if it's 1 hour a month, like, we just can't. There's just no more room. We were working nights, we were working weekends, we worked holidays, weekend, it didn't matter. Every day we worked. And it was just insanity. And we're like, well, we're working so hard, we can't fit any more in, but we're still barely covering expenses. How is this possible? That's what got us to start looking at our numbers. It was like we kind of hit that point of discomfort where we needed to start looking at difficult things, like making difficult choices, doing difficult things in order to find a solution. Sitting on the nail became more uncomfortable than the pain of getting off the nail, So that was kind of the shift. So once we started looking at our numbers, that's when we were able to actually identify what some of these problems were. There was a lot of them, but from a like financial standpoint, from being able to pay ourselves, cover our expenses, be prepared for taxes, be able to work smarter, not harder. All of those things came when we started looking at our financials. So,
And how many years in was that?
I would say that was probably four years in. So we had been doing it hard for a long time, and we were getting just completely burned out. Um, so we started looking, and so the last few years that we had the business, things really started to change. So one, we were like, okay, we are looking and saying, hey, what is our expenses? What's our recurring expenses every month for personal and business? What is our, estimated income for the business every month? So we started outlining these things and kind of building some metrics, like figuring out what these costs were. And one of the greatest things that we ever did was we opened more bank accounts and we started putting money in those other bank accounts. So at that point, we had four. So we had two business accounts and two personal accounts. So when the money came in, every time we did a deposit, we put 15% in a business savings account. So that way taxes was already put aside. We weren't going to spend it, and we didn't have to worry about that anymore. Then we would figure out, be like, okay, these are what the business expenses are. This is how much cash needs to be in the business. And then we would transfer the rest over, take it as a distribution, which I didn't know was called a distribution at the time. But that would go into our personal checking account. And then we would figure out, okay, this is what our personal expenses are. And then we had a certain percentage. So we would try to put at least 20% of what we made into our personal savings account. So we really started handling things more proactively instead of reactionary. And that's when things really started to change. So that was big. But that was also coupled with the fact that when we looked and did a job analysis, which is something that I do with all of my clients that I bring on, is looking and be like, okay, well, yeah, maybe your costs are this, but when you look at specific jobs, I'm invoicing them for this amount. It's costing me this much in supplies, materials, labor. This amount is going to be for taxes and all of that. What's the profit margin? Like, what's actually left over? And when we started looking at that, we realized we're not charging enough. We're losing money. Like, some of these jobs was costing us more to do the job than we were making on the job. So once we started looking at that and started taking action, one of the biggest things that we did was we raised our prices, which was scary. That was probably one of the hardest decisions to make in our business, was to raise prices. All the other things, like, they were helpful, but they were easier. There wasn't as much writing. The risk level wasn't there, just opening an extra bank account. But raising prices, that
Very.
was a truly scary thing. But we were like, we can't fit anything more in our schedule. We've hit critical mass, and we're not going to be able to take on any better jobs unless we replace these ones. So it was scary. It was kind of a shock. We ended up, it was kind of, I was trying to remember when this first happened, is we got a call from one of our commercial accounts, and they said, hey, we're going with a different property management company, and they have their own cleaning service on contract for them. So we're like, and we wouldn't even be back to service that client. It was like, we're done.
Instant.
It was an instant thing. And we're like, oh no. So we kind of made this decision. We were like, okay, well, we got to go get some more jobs. We got to go out and we need to take on some more better jobs. But what should we be pricing the ones that we do have? So we did two things. We raised our prices and we closed in our service area. So we cut it in half. So now, instead of over 60 miles, we're under 30 miles as our service area, which in Montana is rural. That's about a half an hour.
That's quick.
Here in Tampa, 30 miles, like, well, that's 2.5 hours. But in Montana, that was a 30-minute commute. So that was kind of what really helped us. One, we made up so much time that we didn't spend in the car driving, across over here and then over here and back and forth. And then we also raised prices, which was scary. And we did lose some jobs. But honestly, the ones that we lost were the best ones to lose. It was the ones that they were difficult clients. They didn't really fit in with anybody else, as far as like, they were the type, we want you to clean the knickknacks on this shelf, but don't worry about the coffee table over there. Like, very piecemeal. I'm trying to get it down to the dollar. And some of them we raised prices, and it literally meant raising them $20 a month. They were a weekly client. We raised them $20 a month, and which is $5 an invoice, and they dropped us. They're like, nope.
Wow.
But they were some of the hardest jobs that we had, our least profitable ones. So here we lost quite a few jobs, but we started adding up the numbers. Like, okay, so we raised this price and they went for it, and we raised this price and they went for this. We're like, we're making the same that we were before, but we just cut our schedule like almost in half of how much work we had. So we were like, oh my word. It was like this huge aha moment. Be like, we've unlocked like some secret trick. It would be like, man, by raising prices, we have now just made the same amount of money, but we've opened up our schedule. So now that we can take on more better paying clients, and essentially we can double what we're making. But we don't want to do that because we don't want to be at the same level of craziness, never sleeping and, eating every meal in the car. We wanted some kind of life as a result of that. So that's what happened. Like, those were the shifts that we made. Um, and honestly, like, one of the things I was talking to my wife before, she was like, she reminded me of this, and it was really true. When we started estimating things in advance, like, we were able to look at the finances and say, hey, this is the estimation. We know that we're going to make at least this much. This is what we have, but these are what our expenses are, our recurring expenses. Sometimes it was like, man, that's not really going to be enough. So what that allowed us to do was make decisions preemptively, excuse me, instead of, oh yeah, we didn't make enough money last month. We lost money last month. So we would be like, hey, okay, we aren't going to make enough to cover our business expenses and our personal expenses. So we started calling clients and be like, hey, it's been a while. Be like, we wanted to schedule you for a deep clean if that's something that you'd be interested in. Hey, the next time that we come, we noticed that, your chandelier way up in the entryway that's like third story hasn't been cleaned in a long time. Be like, would you like us to deep clean that? Hey, we would just like find other things that we could clean and do a better job with the clients that we had. And the other thing that we did is we asked for referrals. Be like, hey, you know what? We want to, clean as many houses as possible and have as many happy customers as possible. Is there anybody that you know of that would be interested in cleaning? We capitalize on those, especially like around holidays or the end of the year. People are thinking of spring cleaning or fresh start for the new year, family coming into town. So we would just try to leverage those things. And pretty soon we were like, okay, now we've made a plan. We've went out and we've found the money that we need to make. But we could only do that if we were looking at it ahead of time instead of reacting to it at the end of the month.
Night and day difference
Yeah, it
from
was
what
huge.
the first 4 years until after you guys kind of sat down and looked at everything from a broad perspective and were like, stuff needs to change. Otherwise, I mean, it's not sustainable. It's for happiness, for a marriage, for a business. The way you
Yeah.
guys were going about it, it was just wake up and work and go to sleep. That was,
Yeah.
seems like what you guys went through for that time.
Yeah, it was that. Also, like during that time, just from cleaning and growing up, like doing the working as long as we both had. My wife, she had been working as long as she could walk. Like, if you can carry a pitcher walker, say that again fast. If you can carry a pitcher of water to a table, you're on duty. Like you're on shift. So, she was feeling, from having kind of a physical job and working from a very young age. Um, Me too, like in the construction side. I think you would attest to that with moving. Like there's the physical toll. Things wear out when you do that.
Oh, yeah.
Um, we ended up, we were in a car accident at one point, and so like we had some physical limitations from that. Um, so there were so many things that it was like, man, the intensity that we've been doing this for so long, we got to make some shift. Like that was honestly just as big of a discomfort as the financial component to solve the problem. And a big reason why I guess we didn't want to continue with the cleaning business is because of like the physical components. I was developing, like, even now, like sensitivities to chemicals, like break out in rashes if I, messed with, chemicals, not just from our business, but like pressure washing and restaurant kitchens, very, very harsh chemicals, things that eat through your clothes and
So,
often did, just like eat a whole. Uh, I worked with a guy pressure washing, and one day we were cleaning this truck and he looks at me, he was like, oh my word, look at your hat. I'm like, what are you talking about? I took off my hat and the chemical had like eaten a hole the size of probably like a baby orange in my hat.
My
It was just
gosh.
like eating it, like, because the wind changed direction and like splashed it up onto my hat. Anyway, so it was just like things like that. It was just like, man, we gotta change the way that we're operating. So those are some of the things that made us want to shift and work smarter, not harder, um, and the changes that we made in the business. Um, I guess one of the other things, like the changes that shifted in the cleaning business, like before and after, was before we were constantly chasing our tails at the end of the year. And this is a cycle that I see happen with, a lot of people that I work with in bookkeeping, is so they make the money and they're profitable, which is great, but not so profitable and they haven't planned for taxes. So then taxes come and be like, well, your tax bill for last year is going to be, X number of dollars. You're like, I have to go make more money so that I can pay that tax bill, by the due date. And so you go out and you work harder and you get more jobs and you work so that you can pay that tax bill. But now you've just made more money in this year, which means you're going to pay more in taxes next year. And it's like a constant, like this progressively escalating problem that was happening. And that's what we were feeling. So, like, we switched to paying quarterly, which helped, but just shifting the pricing and saving money up front before anything got spent, every deposit, we would slough 15% away. Now we're ahead of the monster. We're not spending any of that money and we know that we're covered. And usually that meant whenever we paid taxes, because we were doing that, we got a nice little bonus on a quarterly or annual basis. Be like, hey, we planned this much for taxes, but it actually wasn't that much. So, congratulations. We get a little bonus. So, those are some of the things that really, really pivoted for us.
Do you know how much you guys made in that 7 years in total revenue? Or
Ooh,
would
man.
that first 4 years be hard because you didn't really tally anything? I mean, I guess you could get statements from those tax years, but do you have any ballpark estimate?
Hmm. I would say towards the end, based on, like, we were able to save quite a bit and all of that for that area. I think we were making, I think we'd passed 50,000, so like in that area, the median income in Montana was like 35,000 or something per household. So we were crushing it in Montana for, being owner operators. Um, but I would say that
And that's 50,000 for both of you, or is that 50,000 each?
no, so that was like, that's what we were making together. Like, we filed together and all of that. And towards the end, we were 100% in the business. The first year, we did that with everything else while it was growing. But I would say that that was probably pretty consistent for the last three three years, 3 or 4 years. We're probably making the same for 4 years, but spending more of it
So that
in
would
the
be
beginning.
50,000 in total revenue per year.
Yeah, yeah. So it was on the small side, um, but it was more than anybody in our family was making, and we were able to put aside, 20% of what we personally made, into savings. So like we were able to live, under, or our means were under what we made, which was a great feeling. And that helped us with the next chapter to have the ability to be like, hey, we have an emergency fund. We can, you know, we can survive. We can survive now. And we actually lived on savings when we sold our business for a year and a half
Wow.
without any, um, doing anything else except just like focusing 100% on the business that we were trying to create. which changed, but this is where we're at now.
So you're in Tampa now.
Yep.
What made you want to start the bookkeeping business then?
Yeah. So, one, we knew that we wanted to help other business owners. Like, that's kind of when we left Montana, we sold the business. We knew that we wanted to help other service businesses and primarily cleaning businesses. So, kind of the synopsis, the cliff notes of all of this is we wanted to help with financing, with financial part of business. And so we did these workshops, of course, online. Everything's locked down with COVID. And so we did these boot camps where people would come in, cleaning business owners, and we would try to identify what their pricing should be. So we would do job analysis, be like, these are all of your accounts, these are all your contracts, these are your costs. This is how profitable you are on each one. And this is what you should charge in order to make a profit. So we started doing those boot camps, but it became very clear we got the same answer every time we started working with a new group of people. We'd maybe like 10 at a time, 10 businesses at a time. They'd come in, we'd work on this together, be like, okay, so what are you doing in revenue, on average? I'm not sure. Okay, let's figure that out. Oh, well, what are your expenses? Be like, I'm not totally sure. Well, how much are you spending on, supplies? I'm not sure. Same answer across the board. It was just, I don't know. And it became very apparent that we weren't the only cleaning business owners that didn't have a way of looking at their financials. So we spent these boot camps not able to solve any of the problems, but just trying to help them get to the point where they had some number to use. And so it was just kind of like this repeating thing. It became this friction point. And so it got to the point where we were like, okay, we have to figure out a way to help these cleaning businesses keep track of their financials so that we can help them, so that we actually have the numbers that we need. Because it's hard to know what the problem is. This just you need more sales? Are your expenses out of whack? Are you like what is the problem?
What are
Don't
you
know without the
doing
numbers.
that you don't know?
Right. Exactly. It's like you can't.
Why do you not know?
Yeah. So that was actually, I created a system first called the Ultimate Budget Tracker, which I still sell on occasion. But basically, it's like a spreadsheet system that allows you to keep your business and your personal expenses side by side. Nice little graphs and things, so it's easy to read and be able to see, hey, my expenses are 50%. I'm putting this amount in savings. It gave you the ability to kind of like track all of those things, how much you are saving, build budgets, um, track things, and see totals like in any given category across your business and personal. It also created, a very basic P&L on the back end of it to where, hey, if I do this and I put all of my transactions in here, I actually have something I could hand over to a tax preparer and be like, this was our sales, this was our expenses, this is how much in each category. And, basic, very basic for businesses that were just starting out. They had nothing else. So that was good, but I was kind of unique in the standpoint that it's like, oh, even younger when I was in high school, like I really liked the numbers. I didn't know what they meant, but I liked numbers. So, most businesses, they start out, they have a very specific thing of what, or a very specific thing in mind when they start their business. Be like, I am a fantastic baker. I want to open a bakery. I am a fantastic cleaner. I want to start a cleaning business. I am great with technology. I want to start a software company. Like, that doesn't mean that they have the skill sets of all the other hats that come with running a business, because you
Right.
got to do everything. You're the marketer, you're the controller, you're the laborer in a lot of cases, you're, customer service, you're all of those
Everything.
things. Yeah. So it became the point to be like, well, I don't want to look at my numbers. I don't know numbers. I'm not good with numbers. And even like just that in itself was the barrier of why they didn't have numbers and they weren't going to have numbers,
Scared them,
because it scared them.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And I still have clients who are like, I hate looking at the numbers. Like, that's why I want to pay you, like, to look at the numbers and tell me what I need to do, because I am scared of them. I don't want to look at them. I feel like if I don't know, then they're not real. Or like the situation, like I still have my vision of how things are going, my innocence.
Don't look under the bed. There's no monster there.
Exactly. So that was kind of like this point that we got to. And so like we tried to build a tool and build a solution, but then the next thing was like, well, people don't want to do this at all. So how can I help them do it? Well, it makes no sense for me to try to manage like these spreadsheet systems and all of that, and very unique for each business and all of that. And so it became apparent, be like, man, we've always struggled with bookkeeping, even in this new chapter, starting like this next chapter of coaching. We had, an accountant, we had a couple of different bookkeepers and things like that, but we struggled with bookkeeping. It wasn't a good experience working with the bookkeepers that we had, and we didn't feel like we knew what we needed to know in order to do it ourselves. So half of it was out of frustration for myself, be like, man, I feel like I need to go figure this out so that I can do this for me, but this is obviously a problem that everybody's having, because I'm not the only one looking for a bookkeeper. So that was where it was just like, maybe we need to start a bookkeeping business. And the shift that happened was, we want to advise, like we want to be able to like take numbers and use them to make actionable change in somebody's business, not just have reports for the tax preparer at the end of the year to pay somebody to help you know how much you should pay to somebody else. Like, that sounds ridiculous. But we want to be able to make like affect change in the business by looking at these numbers. So that's where it was just like, I guess maybe a bookkeeping business would, one, we would guarantee accuracy in the numbers that we were working with. We'd be able to help them take control of their financials and take that off of them. And three, that would put us in a position to be able to use those numbers to help them. It would create the stage for us to actually do this the way that we want to. So that's what we did. So I went back and got some more training, did my DIY. Well, not DIY. I definitely paid to go faster and have somebody help me. But, jumped into a program that would, give me everything that I needed to know to be a bookkeeper, an exceptional bookkeeper. Because the industry, there's a lot of holes in it. And bookkeeper means different things, just like cleaner can mean different things. Are we talking cleaning company, or are we talking, Sally that cleans her neighbor's house,
Right.
once a week? Very broad in that exact same way with bookkeeping. Be like, oh, I do books for our business. Oh yeah, I do bookkeeping for, we have a family friend that, does bookkeeping for us. Not necessarily bookkeeping, not necessarily good bookkeeping. So, got the training, be like, hey, this is actually like how to effectively keep books, how to do this the right way. And so, invaluable education helped me as an advisor immensely to go through that kind of training. And now we have a way of like finally getting to the objective that we've been trying to get to, is helping clients, cleaning business owners succeed, have actual profit make sure they get paid, make sure that they are covering their expenses, to helping them create processes and systems to make that easy for them. Take off the things that we can take off of their plate, but make the things that they're involved in as easy as possible.
So teach them the mistakes that you guys made, but how to do it right. Basically, give them their time back and their profit and not working their bones to the ground and getting very little, if any, profit for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing, like, it's what we tell, like, people when we jump on discovery calls or do coaching calls, say, hey, if I'm doing my job right, I should save you more money than you ever pay me. Like, I should be free to you. I should be free to your business. Like, yeah, you're going to pay me some money, and it might seem like a lot, but actually seeing the numbers and actually doing so in a proactive way is actually going to lead you to either make more money, save you time, or give you
Both.
the, or cut expenses and save or make that money or create the opportunity for you
Or
to go
all
make
of it.
that money or all of that. So that's where we've actually been able to place ourselves and actually have like the greatest impact on cleaning businesses and helping them.
You don't have to go into specifics, but have you had some horror stories with clients that have hired you where you've gone in first 5 minutes and you're like, what the hell is going on?
As far as bookkeeping,
Yes.
yeah, I've fired clients. I have. It's yeah, I've
Wow.
had to fire, just like in the cleaning industry. Some that's like, nope, sorry, like this is not this is not a good fit. This is a liability issue. This is way more than it's
Is
worth.
it just they weren't taking your advice or did it go beyond that?
Yeah, it was a long relationship actually. Um, one of, I think, my third client that I had taken on when I started this business, and worked with her for uh, over a year, and wasn't in the cleaning industry. It was just kind of like starting the business, trying to build the cleaning or build the bookkeeping business itself, and get profitable. So she wasn't in my industry. She was in retail, e-commerce, kind of a hybrid. Had a lot of different things going on. Very complicated business, and cash flow was just a huge problem for her. Um, Spent hundreds of dollars on overdraft fees every month
Yikes.
because of cash flow. So worked with her for a while, um, but essentially, like, it came down to the fact that it wasn't what it comes down to. Doesn't have anything to do with the industry. Doesn't have anything to do with the business. It has everything to do with the fact of, are you the type of business owner that wants to find solutions and solve problems? Or are you the type of business owner that wants to just put your head down, try to push harder, work harder, longer, give it more elbow grease, and just kind of like bully your way through it? Well, that doesn't help you solve the problem. That just, you're exuding more energy, but it's not directionalized. So after this long period of time of working together, it was the fact to be like, hey, these are all of the things, but just not willing to do those things. Not really listening to the advice, and so the problem didn't really change. And the reason, it was kind of a kind of a mercy, like a mercy of getting rid of that client, because she would have paid me whatever. Like, it wasn't that she didn't feel like what we were offering was of value. She'd pay whatever. It was just the fact that, well, you can agree to pay me whatever, but that doesn't mean that the check isn't going to bounce. Like, that's
Yeah.
essentially what it came down to. Like, it's not just a money mindset of like, oh, can you afford our services? It's like your business cannot afford half of the expenses that it has. Pricing was a big thing. Pay structure for employees, labor was insane. Um, Everything, it was basically just a shell game of trying to defer expenses and make money to cover those expenses, and lines of credit after lines of credit. And it was just like
Oh
a
dear.
deepening and widening hole. Um, so that was kind of it. Um, the horror stories for bookkeepers, I didn't know this before. The horror for bookkeepers is getting what they need to do their job, like documents. Um, Simple thing, something every bookkeeper needs is bank statements at the end of every month to finish your reports, reconcile the accounts, all of those things. And sometimes I wait months. And by the time I get one bank statement, there's one or two more statements that are available.
Gosh.
Those things, it comes down to getting a feel for the business owner and how they operate, because some of them like the drama. Like they don't know how to be outside, how to function outside of drama and chaos. And so that's not an environment where things are going to get better. That's not
Absolutely
an
not.
environment where problems are going to be solved. So we've been able to have some huge effects with the clients that are like, one, willing to take the advice, but even if they accept the advice, taking action is the next step. Like that's the harder piece that comes after that. For those that do that, it's great. For ones that are scared or not willing to take that step, it makes sense, but it just perpetuates the same situation, the same circumstances. Um, so that's where a lot of the nightmares and the horror stories come from, the bookkeeping, not handling things proactively, but waiting until they're on fire, which makes them 10 times harder, 10 times more expensive to deal with. Not just for me, like paying me, but tax problems, all of those things. Um, Clients calling, say, hey, I'm supposed to pay my taxes and they're due today. Well, there's a lot of things we got to figure out before we can know what your taxes are.
Yeah.
And like, it's too late now. Like, this is something we should have been talking about weeks ago. Um, those are more the emergencies that come up in the
So,
industry.
what would be the biggest lesson you've learned by being in the bookkeeping industry?
One, well, a couple of lessons. One, I was really hard on myself, with the cleaning business, or anything that I was doing, because as entrepreneurs, we're blazing trails. Like a lot of it, it's not defined. We'd go buy a franchise, like if we wanted to be our own boss, but we wanted something that was, roll out, assemble, and ready to go. But for entrepreneurs, like it's not outlined like that, and it's hard and it's difficult, and it takes intention and energy and effort and discomfort. I was really hard on myself for a long time because I thought that I was the exception. Like, well, I'm having a hard time being an entrepreneur. I'm having a hard time figuring these things out. I'm having a hard time overcoming these challenges. And, it's business is the same as Instagram. Be like, well, there's the snapshots, hey, look at how successful I am. Be like, okay, most businesses aren't profitable. Like, that's just the bottom line. And there's an author, um, Mike Michalowicz. He is the author of Profit First, which is something we use a lot in our bookkeeping firm as far as like advisory, even though we're not like tied to them. His principles are incredible. His book is definitely worth a read. But one of the things that he says is, he was like, most businesses are not profitable He was like, the strategy is turn and burn. Like, you grow the business, you lose money, and the day that you make $1 is the day that you sell it. That's when you make money, but not when it's operating. And that's honestly, that's the case. A lot of businesses, even though they're doing a lot in revenue, does not necessarily mean that they are in a good financial situation, that their business is healthy. And I felt like I was the only one that was struggling with covering my expenses and getting paid as an owner and covering taxes and all of those problems. And I've seen this touches almost every business owner at some point. Maybe they're past that and they've grown beyond that, and that's great. But somebody's come up against this at some point when building their business, because sometimes there's always going to be a phase where expenses exceed what you're making, and there's going to be that growth period. That can go on for decades, or that can be something that you work through starting out building a business, but grow out of with the right planning. So, yeah, that was a huge lesson, I guess, that learned from that standpoint. And then the other lesson that I've learned from taking away from this is the fact that it's just like, you just have to be willing to look at problems and be willing to look for solutions, which is hard. Like, it sounds easy, be like, oh, well, I want to solve this problem. But that's a very strenuous exercise to do that.
Especially in an industry where you would think, oh, okay, cleaning service, cookie cutter. You go in, you clean it.
Mm-hmm.
But as a business perspective, there's a million and one ways that you can structure and run a cleaning service. And it's not cookie cutter, it's not out of the box. So it's difficult. And sometimes finding an answer to the way you are doing something, it's not immediately on Google when you Google that question.
That
It's going to
maybe
take
isn't
digging.
the answer you should take.
Yeah.
Or something you should take action on.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to create the answer yourself by trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what's a piece of advice that you would give to a cleaning business owner that is struggling with numbers right now?
I think one thing that was like a huge shift for me was I was looking at the immediate. I was looking at the business from like, this is where I'm at in this moment. This is how much money is in the bank at this moment. These are what my costs are at this moment. But I wasn't thinking about the eventuality of the business. This is going to grow. This is going to scale. What does this mean? Maybe I can afford in this minute to pay an employee or a contractor this amount. But if I scaled this out and, blew this up times 10, what does that mean? Because making more sales is not the answer. Like, in a lot of cases, some of it when you're first starting out, like, yeah, you got to get to your break even point. But for a lot of clients, it has nothing to do with how many clients they have and how much money their business is making. They're just spending more than they're making. Prime example of that, keeping it vague for protecting the innocent. But, I have a client that is in the restaurant industry. That was one of my first ones that I took on. They're multi-million, like doing multi-million dollars in revenue. Owner can't pay herself. Like, she literally has payroll checks. She's got a drawer full of payroll checks that she hasn't cashed because she doesn't think that she can afford to cash them. So that isn't something that happens just by pouring more money at it. So I guess that would be the advice. Like, think about where you want your business to be. The circumstances that, it's like, well, do you want to keep it small? Do you want to just be you? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're basically just creating yourself a job. But if you want a business that's an investment, or you want something that's going to take care of you, even if you're not there to do it, that takes a lot more structure. There's got to be processes, there's got to be people, there's got to be um, things in place to make all that happen, and all of the costs associated with that. So, can I afford to do this if I did this when my business is at $1 million versus, oh, I'm doing this now when I'm, trying to reach six figures? Two very different points in a business, and depending on who's doing the work. Because for me, it was the shift of like, I'm doing all the work, so what I'm paying myself is profit, right? Because I'm the one getting the money. Like, this is what's left over. This is me as the owner. This is what I can take. But if I paid somebody else to do the work, now that's not profit. That's an expense. Like, paying labor, someone else to do it, that's taking away from my bottom line. So like that shift, and running a business like it's going to scale and it's going to operate and be a functioning organism that can move under its own power and sustain itself without you giving it the Heimlich, then that's how do I make decisions, and how do I run my business like that from where I'm at right now, so that it will get there.
What would you recommend to somebody who can't hire a bookkeeper right away and wants to start getting their ducks in a row to execute to make more profit for themselves? What would you recommend they do?
One of the things that I guess I would say, if bookkeeping is out of the question, that's a goal of ours, is like, we want to make bookkeeping accessible by as many people. And I have some that are startups. Like, I have some that it's like, it's not because they're these businesses that have been in business for years. This is their first year in business, and they're just trying to figure it out. I still want to be able to work with them and be able to help them, because in a lot of ways it doesn't work to do it yourself. It just causes a mess later on to undo it, from a bookkeeping perspective. But one thing, like when it comes to profit, helping your business is keep things separate. Treat your business as a business, not as a hobby, but as something that it's like, if you want this to be a business, start the way you want to finish. Set up those bank accounts and figure out like, what are those expenses going to be, and how do I plan for those? Because those money doesn't fix those problems. They got to be looked at, and they got to be addressed. As far as like tools and solutions, I would highly recommend anyone to read the book by Mike Michalowicz, Profit First. I don't know if he has one. Well, I think he has one for the service industry. There's like co-authors. They're like Profit First for restaurants, Profit First for, I think there's one for the service industry. But even just the basic book, I think, changes your mindset, and like thinking about a business, not thinking about your personal bank account and, groceries and going out to eat, finances from that perspective, but from a business owner. And then the other thing, like, it is a lower price point. We do sell that budget tracker. Sometimes I get on discovery calls. Those are free. Like, get on a discovery call with you, have a conversation, talk about what your needs are, and try to point you in the right direction, whether that's another service or a tool. I have calls with clients all the time that maybe they're not in a position to take on a bookkeeper, but I'm making recommendations like, hey, Booking Koala could help you out. Or, I'd recommend Relay Bank as a great bank that's going to help you with cash flow with your business. Or I would recommend, Mike Michalowicz's book, or here's a spreadsheet system that I created that is more of a DIY. So that's an option. On our website, have that, squeakycleanbooks.com. And it's like a $97 one time, but it's a whole video series. You get the tool, get a new one every year. So it's a flat price. but you kind of have like a DIY, go through it, set it up yourself, and manage it by yourself, and show you how to use it and get the most out of it. Um, so that's a cheaper alternative if you're at that place yourself.
Excellent. Austin, your story and everything that you've told us with the cleaning service and the highs and lows that you went through with that, getting you to the point where you're now a bookkeeper for these businesses, showing them the ropes on what not to do like you did so that they can be successful is eye-opening, because there's a lot of business owners out there that are doing things right, but nobody's doing everything right from the start. And you're
For
always
sure.
going to want to keep learning, keep growing your mind and taking your business to the next level. And I think one thing that scares people is numbers. And having you on today and explaining your story of how you were a former cleaning service owner and the mistakes that you made that have transpired into having this bookkeeping service now is huge. And I think anybody who is struggling with their finances should take a look at a bookkeeper. Don't necessarily hire the first person that you speak to either. Hop on discovery calls, do what your cleaning clients do, and shop around, see what you get with different people. And like you said, when you hop on discovery calls with potential customers, there are other options that you can give them for free first, and that kind of gives you a foot in the door, because if they take those to heart and they start using them and they see changes, they're going to come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
So fantastic stuff. Thank you again for sharing your story. It was quite eye-opening to see, for sure.
More than
And
you wanted to know.
no, I mean, not more than I wanted to know, but I'm glad that we got the opportunity to share it, because I'm sure there are others who are in similar situations who are trying to figure out how to get out of them. So it was a pleasure.